Hello, this is your host Todd Lewis of the Praise of Five podcast. I'm joined by RedHawk again, and for the first time, Hunger the Die Merchant. Glad to have you guys here, gentlemen.
Thank you for
Glad to
having
be
me.
here.
Yeah, so I decided to jump in on this sort of question that's usually going on. You know, the women content creators are getting mad at somebody, and then there's the RP slash incel crowd, which are just telling the women to shut up, and then there's the wife bros who are simping, saying, "No, you got to be nuanced, bro." And then I was first introduced to this either by your article on OGC, RedHawk, or some of the Twitter stuff with like the Wifejack meme. So what actually happened? Like how would you contextualize all this?
I guess I would contextualize it by, and we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, how basically like once a year this kind of dust up between the men and the women are facing off once again throughout the right-wing internet space. And if I was to throw a bone and be charitable to women such as Alex Kashuta and Philosophicat and Sydney Watson and maybe even Lauren Southern to some degree and many others, is that basically no matter what happens when any of these women like tweet about literally anything, you're going to have a series of like spurgy guys in the comments and the responses just dunking on them for basically no reason, right? It's going to be like, oh, you're a woman, shut up, you don't have any real opinions, like you're just here for attention, you're an e-whore or whatever it may be. So if I would be charitable to them, I would say that, yeah, that's pretty unhealthy behavior and people probably shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. And their response is that, oh, well, this is going to drive women further away from the right and such. And their argument being that women are essential for like politics and essential to have any movement in the future lead us out of whatever it is that we're calling it modernity and form whatever it is that we want to build. Now, I would agree with part of that. It's like, yeah, I mean, men and women definitely need to come together at some point, right? I mean, that's how family creation is formed and how communities are formed and how sets of values are formed and everything like this. So you do need to have some degree of meeting of minds, right? But the problem that I will fire back at with these women is basically they're just pissing in the wind. Essentially, they're arguing against an unsolvable problem. Number one, there's an issue with the simple fact that a majority of women who are online are 100% there just to seek attention and aren't actually contributing anything to the discourse. And the other problem is, and our good friend Charlemagne wrote a fantastic Twitter thread about this maybe like a year and a half ago or something. People could go look it up. But Charlie brings up a fantastic point where because of women's communitarian nature and the sisterhood uber alles, and it's jacked into overdrive on Twitter, right? Because you can have any woman from anywhere in the world say something. And therefore, because the sisterhood is hitting you in the back of the brain, you have to therefore say, oh, okay, well, if this one ridiculous circumstance is affecting Lauren Southern, who literally is in her own position because of her own shitty choices, it's not, any other woman's problem. This is just because of women's nature. Like, oh, we have to all, defend her like a nest of bees all of a sudden. Like any woman's problem immediately becomes, front and center for any other woman who sees it. And so it kind of plays into women's solipsism. And at the same time, guys dunking on them and such at the same time. It's basically the only thing that's going to solve this is censorship. And it's like censorship is just not on the table. It's not in the cards. So I don't really care that your feelings are hurt because your suggestion to fixing it is going to be, getting rid of all like spurgs on the internet, which is literally impossible. So I guess that's the brief summary.
Right. I mean, it's kind of the occupational hazard, right? There's always going to be the spurg and the troll on the internet. If you're going to be on the internet, that's just what you have to expect. It's like you go in the jungle and there's going to be tigers, right? It's just how it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing too, which is something that all the other male content creators and some of the female ones, I will give a shout out to my good friend Mac and Liberty, also known as Kenzie Puff, who seems to be the only woman who has her head squared on straight when addressing these issues. But it's just like I'm not going to stop everything because, some woman is being made fun of online. I mean, I get called names every single day online. I block people. I mute threads. I mute, whole conversations. I'll turn off my notifications because I just don't want to look at what some idiot has to say online. Like everyone gets this. You're not special This isn't like a woman only issue that like people get made fun of online. This is just part of the territory.
All right, Hunger.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just that. I mean, the complaints coming from women about, I mean, comments from men they get online. This is the nature of the beast. I mean, like, what other purpose is there for social media other than, you interact with randos? If you don't want to interact with randos, Twitter has a block button. It's not a complicated issue, but they had to I don't want to speak too generally, but the right women had to make this a much bigger deal than it already was, because you can filter out a lot of the low quality, low T men who are like the Nick Fuentes people, like, oh, I would never be with a woman. I would never, oh, girls have cooties, that kind of crowd. And that's kind of what they're complaining about. They're getting, negative comments and negative attention from these people. But one, that's just the internet. And two, when a low quality person says something to you like that, it comes out very differently versus when it comes from like someone like BAP, or when BAP is being a misogynist, or when Zero HP Lovecraft is being a misogynist. It comes from somebody with substance. It's not a rando from the internet. And they're not complaining about, BAP, or they're not complaining about Zero HP Lovecraft. They're talking about, this massive horde of like low IQ males on Twitter who are, scrolling their DMs, scrolling their tweets and like saying you're fat, you have no eggs, all that stuff. That's the gist of what these women are complaining about. And it's like RedHawk said, it's not really a solvable problem unless you want to institute mass censorship. Like, you can't police being mean on the internet. You can police crime. You can police, threats of violence, but you can't police, it's not illegal to be an asshole yet.
Yeah,
exactly. I think another thing that ties into this discussion is the radical difference between how men and women communicate with each other, and particularly how men communicate amongst each other in a male-only space. And what I'm getting at is the I guess you call it performative misogyny, also mixed with the way that men's humor generally is. It's like you just take something to the nth degree, and what is often seen as humor and jokes, even though many of these guys, particularly on the low end of the spectrum, are not doing things in jest and and making these comments in a joking manner. They're actually are trying to be hurtful and get a response. I think that's another thing that kind of gets looped into this whole discussion of like what male humor is actually like and such. I mean, I'm sure a lot of women will recoil when they see a Zero HP Lovecraft tweet say she could lose weight, and it could be like the skinniest woman you've ever seen in her entire life, and Zero HP Lovecraft is still saying, exactly, it's a joke, and a hilarious joke at that. No matter, I don't care how many times I've seen that tweet come across my timeline, I'm liking it, retweeting it every time. It's just so fucking funny.
So the only sort of contextualization before this that I saw was Dave's stream a week or two ago. And I mean, basically what he's just saying is that there's I guess 2 or 3 layers here. Dave talks about once you win, cringe people take up your slogans. And so you sort of lose quality control when you win. That's one thing he says. Then he says, well, a lot of these people are just, avant-garde performers. The ones that are, quote, more respectable, like you said, a Bronze Age pervert or Zero HP Lovecraft. Then he claimed that the guest that Alex Kashuda had on was also just this performative artist, and that this is something we just need to accept and it's fine. And then that, that was, I guess, maybe the 2 main things. And I think, looking at that, I'm like, well, really, do we really have to just accept this? Because I guess it depends on what you're trying to do, right? Because if you have like a political movement and you have these like avant-garde dramatists, it does undercut the viability of the movement. And it's like, well, okay, what exactly is this movement trying to do? Because, like, for example, if we want to go to like something that we can't really say anymore, the mid-20th century Germans, when they were organizing, they didn't put up with this. Neither did the Bolsheviks. So the question is, what exactly is the goal here? Because from Dave's perspective, he's someone who's sort of already made it. that this is sort of a community space for content creators like himself that have either made it because of their content or because of their real life work. And it kind of creates like this kingly court kind of mentality where you have these people just doing their own flamboyant things. And it's like, well, yeah, but does that really help us win? And I think that there's some assumptions that could be questioned. But as far as like Dave's take, we'll throw it to you, RedHawk, first.
I mean, I thought that Dave's take was relatively reasonable. I've had disagreements with him in the past on certain issues, but in this case, I think he's more or less kind of correct for a number of reasons. I mean, I think the first thing here is that, it kind of is like, okay, so who actually is within the movement, right? I mean, like the people at the top, I guess the people who are like the movers and shakers, the guys who actually make the content, the guys who go out to the banquets and to the events and give the speeches and everything, like people like that probably should not be behaving in this kind of manner in a directly kind of adversarial way, which I think is kind of fine. But at the same time, I think he was also pretty reasonable when he was discussing the actual breakdown of the discussion that Alex Kashuda and Radfem Hitler had on their channel, which there's just like absolutely zero substance in their actual critiques because, again, like nothing real is being said. It's just two hens clucking about things. And I mean, it just goes back to like what I said in my article that I wrote for the OGC. Like, I really just find it so hard to care like about what any like right-wing e-girl is like has to say on some matter about like getting offended on something. Like I just don't fucking care. I don't have time. You're not like an active part of my actual life. I'm not dating you. I'm not married to you. You're not the mother of my kids. Like I have zero time for your complaining all the time because I just know, like we've said at the start of this discussion, this is just an unsolvable problem. So I'm not going to waste my mental energy to try and make it easier for you. There are pathways available to you. You can either spend less time online, you can roll with the punches, you could block, you could mute, you could do whatever you want, but I just don't care.
All
I
right.
mean, just to throw it out there, one possible solution is to segregate the internet.
Well, yeah, that would solve a lot of problems, but again, not going to happen.
Exactly. It's never going to happen. And we've seen what a segregated internet looks like. I mean, the male coded internet would be either like Reddit or 4chan, and the female coded internet would be like Tumblr and YouTube.
Instagram to some degree, very female dominated.
Definitely.
Well, and also too, given the way that you grow your channel, right? Most people grow their channel by the rage cycle, right? I mean, that's how a lot of the DR people got started. And that's how Sargon got started, right? He was going after the feminists. Oh, look at this outrageous thing a feminist did today. And so part of this is just them working their angle to, get out there.
Yeah, there's definitely a part of that as well. I mean, that's certainly how Radfem Hitler has built her entire brand, right? Just like this performative misandry, which, I mean, maybe she holds, maybe she doesn't. I know some people IRL who've actually sat down, had drinks with this woman, and they've had different things to say as opposed to, what she actually says online. So there might be a little bit difference behind the curtain, so to speak. But again, it's like, yeah, this is the way you can get out there on the map. Everyone likes to weigh in on the gender dynamics discussion because we can all see that there's clearly some problems going on right now across all spectrums of our society as it relates to the relationships between men and women. So of course, this is going to be a hot button issue, and a lot of tempers are going to flare.
Right. So now we'll get to the other thing, the corollary to this, the Wifejack meme, which when I saw it a week or two ago and it started, like everybody was making that meme. It was the idea of this point had already grown, this e-drama had already grown. And it was basically like the wife bros kind of simping for the e-girls. And then the guys that didn't have any women in their lives were like, well, this behavior is just stupid. And it's like, this is a good example, right? So I saw this from J4 who retweeted this guy, 15th century Byzantine ideologue, Gemitos Plethon. New meme for wife guys to come out and openly admit they are miserable and that women are insufferable, stupid skanks. Some guys will still say me for being an incel wild. Then reply to this guy is by Aristophanes. You hate women because they're retarded. I love them because they're retarded. It's a fundamental difference.
I remember seeing that.
I think here's the problem, right? Here's
so
the problem. These wife bros have already made it, so they're probably in the 6-figure range. This kind of behavior is a lot easier to, quote, tolerate when you're in the 6-figure range than when you're in the wage cuck situation, right? And so part of this is that there's partly a financial energy consumption component to this. People who are in disadvantaged positions have lower tolerances for BS. And the other thing is, this is, I think, an interesting question to bring up too, right? Because if we look at, say, what was normally expected, now we would all admit on the right here that, you know, we're in the Kali Yuga. This is the end of a cycle of degeneracy and decay. But say in the 19th century, and if we look at like even, quote, women's lit, like say, you know, Lit Women by Louisa May Alcott, and then the Victorian novels, you know, like Emma and Pride and Prejudice. This kind of behavior was not acceptable for a lady at that time. And I think that if we are going to deal with these problems, rather than making excuses, we should be like, okay, what we need to do is figure out how we got derailed from what was normative expected behavior 200 years ago. Now, that's not going to necessarily be an easy question to ask or problem to handle, but I think that's where we need to start. We'll throw it to you, Hunger.
I wouldn't idolize the 19th century too much. I mean, we saw the beginnings of the suffrage movement, and just to be very honest, I mean, women have always been women. Okay, they women only change when the social conventions and social norms change. So if you want to change how women think, or at least what they think, you have to change the social norms. And in this day, in our day and age, you know, I mean, the feminist idea of like, I can never be attacked for any of my beliefs. I can never be attacked for any of my actions because I'm a woman. I mean, it's the escape from responsibility. That's what we're kind of living through now. And I want to go back to like this broader cycle. You know, we had this drama a month or two ago, and then the Wifejack meme that you talked about exploded for like 4 or 5 days. I mean, like you could not open Twitter without seeing a redheaded woman cartoon on your timeline. And now we're back into another cycle of woman drama with the whole Lauren Southern thing. And like that brief respite of the wife, I don't know what you mean by wife bros exactly, because I'm very pro the Wifejack meme. And I'm not married, I'm single currently. But I mean, going back to that tweet by what's his name, Byzantine something, it's like, yeah, there actually is an incel problem, and these very low quality men are attacking random women on the internet because they can't get any. I mean, I can't say it any other way, because they don't have a woman in their life. And one of the tweets I said was like, you've never felt what it's like to have a woman, you know, to be the number one man in a woman's life. Like, if you've never had that feeling before, then you don't know anything about women, and you have no right to talk about women in any way, shape, or form.
I am. I'll throw a little bit more of a bone than Hunger did here. I will say that I think it is healthy in the sense of it's just a natural part of the process for guys to fix their shit, to go through a bit of an anger phase, and often this anger takes the form of lashing it out at women. Now, really what the anger is actually a symbol of is that you're angry at yourself being the guy for all this wasted time and wasted energy you put in down this path that was simply just not working for you. And often you will lash out. It can be at women, can be at other guys, can be at, you know, society, whatever it may be. So anger is natural. It's totally normal. It's totally justified as well for men. It's your default emotion. So I got no problem with guys who want to go and rage out and such. What my issue is that when this becomes like an identity for yourself, like you wrap this up, like you become part of a team, right? You know, you're like, oh, we're going to get together and have the incel revolution, stick it to those women, right? And they're all going to suffer because they're lost their eggs, and they're going to spend the rest of their lives and they're toast, right? That I think is unproductive. But I will also agree with Hunger in saying that, yeah, I really enjoy the Wifejack meme. I think it's speaks to something really, it kind of speaks to two things, right? The first thing it speaks to is all women are like that, and basically they are. You know, what the meme does a perfect job of showing is this thing that women will do. And I love the design of the meme as well, because like the chick is like wearing a sweatshirt, her hair is kind of done up, but it's not like raggedy, it's not all over the place. Basically what the girl is doing the absolute minimal job possible to like look attractive still. And women will do this all the time. They'll do themselves up a little bit, and then they're going to come to you, and then they're going to ask you to do something. And the way they ask you to do something is so, it's never direct, because women are never direct with anything, because they can't be rejected. If you reject a woman,
unless they're yelling at you, RedHawk, unless they're yelling at you.
Yeah, exactly. So
So true.
what she's going to do is going to come into the room and basically say something into the effect of an observation she made. And then it's just basically the assumption is, okay, can you come and do this for me, because I can't do it? You know, so
It's really cold in here.
yeah, exactly. You know, it's like there's a noise in my car. There's a spider in the bathroom. You know, like whatever it is, right? It's basically a way for a woman to say, I need a man to help me do something because I can't do it myself, is essentially what it is. And a lot of guys who aren't in like relationships will see this as, oh man, you're getting longhouse, the woman's ordering you around or something. It's like, no, that's not really what it is. What it really is like the only way they can communicate is the only way they know how, like a child, basically. And you, again, like Aristophanes is saying, it's like, I love women because they're retarded. And yeah, I do too. I love women because they're retarded.
So let me explain.
Absolutely.
Let me explain, Hunger, what I mean by the wife bros. Is there's two things, right? One is it's a framing device, right? So they'll look at, say, the Spurgs and say that there's a large demographic of men that need to fix themselves. But when women are acting badly, they won't then hold them and say, hey, you know, you've got to step up too. It's like they're all equally victims, no matter how bad one is acting or not. And that's a pattern that I've noticed for a while.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. There's definitely a lot of that too.
I can totally understand that. The problem is the problem is very simple. How do you hold women accountable?
Well,
I mean, you're not their father, you're not their brother, you're not their boyfriend. Like if you don't have a relationship with these women.
For them, the wife bros, though, that they have a wife, so that's a very real question for them. But the other thing is there's certain. Okay, let's just make it about these incel guys again, right? Certain toxic behavior, especially if you're struggling economically, is just an unnecessary burden on you, and you're just gonna throw them off. It's like, well, I don't have time for this, right? Life is hard enough without you in my life to make it worse. And so there's a certain threshold, let's call it a fudge factor threshold, where it's like you tolerate a certain level of fudge because you can't, right? So let's say you making six figures, life's working out for you. A lot of guys will tell themselves they can handle that. That will be something you can't really handle when you're making 30, you're at the poverty line and you're working two jobs and life's going down the shitter for you. Like those two situations are radically different with what you can budget for with someone's personal behavior. And that's just a realization that I don't see these guys making.
I just want to push back on that one very quickly. I see where you're coming from, but I don't think this is a socioeconomic thing. I mean, there are tons of guys. I mean, again, you know, I'm around minorities more often than not because of my location and family. But I've seen a lot of guys making $45,000 a year. And I mean, they might as well be working class whites. You know what I mean? Like working class whites don't have problems with women because they go after other working class women as well. Like I think you're talking about a specific class of person, and that's not in the lowest income.
Well, the thing is, even if you're making that kind of money, it depends on where you're living in the country. I'm talking about the United States here, and you're still going to be having a hard time at $45,000 a year. Especially with all the costs of everything going up.
Well,
I mean, these people don't get married, but they don't have problems with women.
Well, it depends on what you're going to define as a problem with women. Is your problem that you're not attracting them? Is your problem that you're not keeping them around? Is it a problem that you're not having a relationship in which the girl is in your frame? There's a lot of different ways to address like problems with women, right? I mean, I could definitely say, depending on your attitude, if you're working like a couple of jobs, you could take this the other way and say, I'm working 2 jobs. I don't have time for your feminine bullshit here. You're either coming over and you're doing what I say, or I'm fucking leaving and going to do other work. Well, so it kind of depends on what your mindset is going into the circumstance. But I do agree with Todd here that, money buys you options, right? And when you have more options, you have more flexibility with how you want to deal with certain problems. So no doubt, if you have the choice, if you're married with wife and kids, would you rather be making more money or less? Like, you'd obviously rather be making more.
Yeah. So, but this gets to, I guess, the other part of the sliding scale is holding to standards. Now, obviously, in the right-wing sphere, it's more natural to hold men to higher standards. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but what I use the term wife bro, which I guess isn't really out there right now, they are not really interested in holding women to any standards at all. It's like, well, you just have to eat it. And it's like, well, if you're making 6 figures, I guess you could eat it. I still would want to eat it with making 6 figures. The idea is, well, there's no corresponding effort on the other side to up their game. And it's like, where is that? Like, given that we're both going through this period of decline and degeneracy, there's going to have to be a lot of work on both sides. And when one side can split the sexual battle to pit men against men, and then one group of men says, well, you don't have to step up at all, it's like, well, okay, we're not really going anywhere. RedHawk.
Well, I guess there's a couple things to address here. I mean, number one, simply that men are hierarchical by nature, and we're not communitarian by nature. So I don't think you're ever going to have, and this is where I have big disagreements with people like Paul Elam and other like men's rights activist kind of people. And there's never going to be like a male revolution, like a feminist movement or the equivalent for men, right? There's never going to be like a male first movement. It's just never going to work that way, right? Because by our nature, we're forming ourselves into man or bones, certain groups or such. But I'm never really concerned about like the overall concept of like every man like as a whole, right? I care about the guys that are in my immediate in my immediate sphere of influence, right? So yes, there's this thing about like, oh well, men got to stand up, and it's like I agree with you, Todd, in the way that a lot of these like wife bro guys go about this issue. It's just a completely wrong way, and it's kind of coming from like a whipped kind of longhouse way, for lack of a better word.
Bingo.
But at the same time, the only way you're really ever going to fix your issues as it relates to women and such is by you adapting to yourself. Like you're never going to be able to hold women accountable as a group. You're never going to be able to really get them to change. What you can do is change a individual woman who's in your frame and that you want to work on. But going about saying, oh, all these women need to change. It's like, I don't really care if women go about and like decide to change or not. I care about the woman that I'm courting is going to change and follow my lead.
Yeah, no, it's impossible, and we frame this entire discussion as like literally a gender war. It's like it's men versus women. It's not men versus women. Men versus women has never existed in the history of humanity. I mean that's just not how we roll as a species.
Like, I will say, if I would to interject, I don't mean to interrupt, Hunger. I will say that feminism by itself does. It puts gasoline on the fire, right, where it needlessly wasn't before. So I would say that there are a significantly growing faction of women, particularly on the younger side of things, who kind of get the operating software of men are bad, men are enemy, when there really isn't that for men. I mean, if men really hated women, if men really actually hated women, we wouldn't talk about them. But we do. It's like the number one thing we fucking talk about.
Yeah, no, but it's like you said. I mean, the two problems with women is that, I mean, they exist in a hive mind. I mean, like I've seen this with a former woman of mine. Like she'll just like adopt a position because everyone around her in that group had said something. It's like, oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's like, what are you talking about? No, you don't. It's like the hive mind activates it, and that's a big problem. And like you said, the only solution to that is to get that one woman or any woman you have a relationship with in your personal life, get them out of that, system or sisterhood, and get them as far from the hive mind as possible. That's the only thing you can do. You cannot hold women as a collective responsible for anything.
Well, okay, so this gets to the ultimate then response issue, because as you said, RedHawk, on the one hand, since these are anonymous online people, just ignore them on both sides of this disagreement and just move on. And then, but of course, that's not going to happen because people like to get involved in the drama. But then the other thing is, and I think you would agree with this, RedHawk, and you said this in other places before, I believe. You get what you put up with, and that's with everything in life. And so then the question is, there seems to be a sort of element of men in this sector telling other men, be willing to put up with more crap in life. And it's like, well, what if we don't want to? You get what you put up with. Anything to say on that right now?
Yeah, there definitely is an extent to that for sure. Now, I would say that the spirit of what the, well, for lack of a better word, we'll call them the wife bros, if you've been referring to them, Todd. I think the spirit of what they're saying is probably correct in that, yeah, like as a guy, like your life is suffering, basically, right? It's just simple fact of the matter, right? Nothing is going to be given to you because you don't have, tits and a vagina. It's just simply how it goes, right? You have to earn respect. You have to earn a place. You have to earn a keep. You have to earn friends. It's just how it is. The classic Camille Paglia quote is that women are and men must become, right? Now, the issue with that is that when these guys go about and apply it to particularly the modern dating marketplace, where many of these guys have been out of the loop for 10, 20 years in some respects, that I do have an issue with, and I will push back a little bit. It's like, all right, fellas, listen here. This isn't like, the 1990s and the 1980s where you just walk down to the nearest bar and a woman is going to go out of her way to make herself available to you. And they're more amenable to talking and cold approaching and such. And they know how to flirt. And, they haven't been indoctrinated with a bunch of social media memes and a bunch of bullshit. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. But I think the spirit of what they're saying, that, yeah, you have to go out there and take your licks and take your punches and work hard and get rejected a bunch. That I definitely do agree with. I don't think that much has changed,
while the individual circumstances, the individual factors and such have changed.
Yeah, that hasn't changed, but it's definitely gotten significantly harder, especially compared to the 2000s at least. Probably the 1990s was even probably an easier time, much easier time in the 90s as well. But no, that hasn't changed. It's yeah, you can like I said, the female hive mind and the influence of social media on women's behavioral patterns has been an extremely negative consequence, and why so many of our guys of young dudes, people younger than us especially so, have such a really, really hard time. But that can be solved. I mean, get your shit together. If you, the older you get, women stay young. I mean, having more experience, having someone
easier.
Look up to you, it does get easier. And as long as you're not a slob in your 30s or late 20s, you can still make it. I know plenty of guys who got married at mid 30s, and their life isn't over. But that's much later than the norm. So your life doesn't end if you're still single at 30. It's not over for you.
Well, right. Well, in most cases, yes. Now, the flip side is the women can't really wait because mid-30s is past the wall, so that's different. But this I think actually gets to, okay, the meta issue that I'm trying to get at here is expectations. And you brought up something good, RedHawk, about the wife bros, is they have a certain assumption about life. We'll call it Jocko, good. Everything just blew up in your face. Good. It's well, there's opportunity cost to this. Again, if you have a lot of money, it's a lot easier to eat punches to the face. But if you're at the bottom eating goy slop, eating punches to the face is not going to be nearly as easy as someone who's got a lot of money. And then this also just begs the question, if we're going to build a better community on the right, do we want a community where we're always getting punched in the face? So for example, going back to the mid 20th century Germans, right? The idea was that for the Germans, they would have a better deal than they did in Weimar Germany, where there was people looking out for you in the government and, fellow nationalists. And this is what happened, I think, after Charlottesville. After Charlottesville, we had more of a libertarian takeover, where it's dog eat dog, devil take the hindmost, and this sort of like community-oriented attitude kind of got self-selected out because of antics at Charlottesville. RedHawk.
Yeah, you bring up a very interesting point about, okay, so we here on the online dissident right, whatever you want to call it, ideally we want to be building these in-person communities, and we want to be helping each other out that are our guys, so to speak, to put that in quotes, right? We want to get them into good paying jobs, we want to get them into successful careers, we want to get them into happy families and relationships if we can. And I think this is a very noble goal to have at the end of things. And I'm glad that you are bringing up these topics, Todd, because this is where people need to start focusing their energies at some point here for sure, if we ever are going to have any degree of success. I guess, I kind of just take this from the other side of, are those things here yet? No, not exactly. Could they be in the future? Yes. Could it be, something that some guys after us take advantage of, and maybe they're going to have an easier time of it with, finding a woman within our communities that we want to build? Yeah, that's entirely possible as well. I don't know. It just doesn't exactly seem like that is where my talents are going to be best dedicated to at this time. And I find it really, really hard for me to find sympathy for other guys if you're having issues in your relationship, when there's so much material out there at this point for you to get your shit straightened up. There's plenty of guides to fix your fashion. There's plenty of guides to fix, lifting weights and how to do cold approaches and how to talk and such. I mean, the material is there. It is possible for you to go and fix yourself. I mean, it's not going to be easy. And quite frankly, I don't think it should be easy. But I'll pass the ball over to Hunger here. Do you agree? Do you disagree, sir?
Oh no, 100%. But I just want to add one thing to that as well. And it's that I don't know where this meme started from, but like there's this expectation that, if a woman doesn't agree with your politics, then I don't want her. It's like, oh, if she's not as right wing as me. Yeah, I know. It's like if she's not as right wing as me, if she's not, if she disagrees with me on abortion, or if she disagrees with me on, I don't know, whatever issues there are in the day. Maybe she's a feminist on a couple things, and it's like, oh, then she's tainted. No, she's like, no, she's part of the hive mind. It's like, the purpose of the community is not to have, how do I say it? You don't want a woman with your political opinions. One, there are very few of them. Two, men are extreme, by nature. If you're part of this community, you don't want a woman with very, very extreme views. Most women don't care. And the best kind of woman, in my opinion, is a non-political woman. Like, they just don't care. It's not their issue. They shouldn't have to care about politics. If they care about politics, then I don't know. You might want to look into that. Why do they care about politics so much? Like, right. Sam Hyde had a great quote about this. It's like, you don't want what's it called? You don't want Murdoch Chan. You want a man. Like you want a man
with Asperger's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, see, I think where a lot of this is, a lot of the problems are developing here is, again, to go meta again, expectations. On the one hand, there's this sort of like weird Maud and Bailey aspect. So on a very like superficial, exoteric level, we're all going to, there's going to be a lot of similar rhetoric being mouthed by all members of this drama. But then as soon as you try to actually render or reify or make explicit that exoteric statement, a whole lot of esoteric stuff starts coming out. And it turns out that people all have radically different understandings of what that would look like in practice. And it's often solipsistic, which is what they think. And this then creates no end of problems, because on one level, we're all saying the same thing. But on the other level, we're all radically different in how we understand what that thing is. And that's a very meta level issue to solve. But the first step in solving it is actually admitting that it's there and then starting to talk about it. RedHawk.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first step in any problem is admitting there's a problem, right? I mean, I guess my question comes down to, and kind of where I've found myself and much of where I think about is how you're going to fix this issue is, I mean, like, at the end of the day, like if you're having relationship problems, it is your problem. At the end of the day, particularly here in 2024, we don't have flourishing communities yet. Not all of us are, all of us are starting to move from the online into the real, but we don't have any communities for ourselves, yet, much less having a significant amount of women yet to pair guys up with and such. So, I mean, this like grand overarching crusade about fixing all the women and giving all of our guys happy relationships and such, I mean, it's just not there yet. You could wish that it would be, and maybe it will be in the future. And maybe you could make grounds and gains as to ensuring that comes about in the future. But for now, I mean, you just have to bite the bullet and accept the fact that if you're having a problem, it's your fucking problem. It's not anybody else's, and you got to go and fix it. And you could sit here and complain and wish everything was better. And I can agree with you to some extent, but at the end of the day, like I can't go around and attract women for you. It's just not possible. It can't be done.
And, and also don't be turned off by the fact that a woman has a left-wing opinion on something. I mean, this bothers me because it's like they're part of they are part of the hive mind. They're going to agree with the societal norms of this day and age. That is not a problem, that is not a problem. Women are very adaptive. They're very malleable. If they like you,
Thank God,
they will change.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah. Thank God they're like that too.
This is not a bad thing at all. It's you want a woman who is agreeable. Like agreeable women are beautiful women, very, very attractive, very, very nice to be around. Why wouldn't you want that? Disagreeable women go against the social conventions and trends.
Well, okay, so I think what I'd say, RedHawk, is I don't think the sort of criticism you're leveling at say that the Byzantine guy or whatever, or people that he represents, is exactly right. Well, let me put it this way: what would I mean? Obviously, I guess that means you'd be SOL, but given that there's a certain set of expectations and behaviors that women are just normally allowed to have, and that they just don't want to put up with just at all, and then the kind of woman that maybe once existed 100 years ago doesn't now, and they're just not interested anymore. It's not so much that it might be the case that they can't be successful, but it's like they just don't even want to bother given what the available resources are.
I mean, I could definitely be sympathetic to that. It's definitely a lot of work. It's definitely a pain in the ass, particularly like if you are courting like younger women. It could be a real pain in the ass to match with them on a dating app and go through like a messaging process and then get her in front of you and such. And yeah, I mean, I get it. It could be a lot of work and could be really daunting. And sometimes you want to take a break and whatever. I totally get that. I'm even sympathetic to some degree who guys just throw up their arms and say, okay, I'm done. I've had my time at the fishing pond and trying to fish for something, and I'm giving up on, I'm done with it. Like, I've got no issue with that. I'm not going to shame you for it. I'm not going to shame you for checking out. But what I will say, and I just won't give any credit to this whatsoever at all, is if you're going to decide to go that way, then at that point you've forfeited all rights to complain. As far as I'm concerned, it's like if you're saying, okay, I'm tapping out of this thing, I don't want any part of it. It's too much work. I've got other things I want to do with my life. I have other, missions I want to, dedicate my energy to. I'm totally fine with that. You'll never hear me complain about it. But then don't sit there on the sidelines saying, oh, like women are this and I want them to be this way to therefore make my job of courting them easier. It's like, no, you can't have it both ways. All right. If you're going to check out, then check out and just own it.
Oh, okay. Well, then what I'll say then to further Steelman this side is they're not allowed to check out. If they're still in the scene, they're going to get it from both ends. They're going to get it from the e-girls and the wife bros. And it's like, well, when you get shots coming your way, you're going to fire shots back.
Or you could just not let it bother you.
Oh, you could, but
yeah, I mean,
it's online. That's like,
well, it's like the same thing we were talking about earlier about like women complaining about shots being thrown at them as well. I mean, like most of like all my detractors are men of some kind. It's not normally women, and I don't really care. I'm
no, yeah, you don't care. But what I'm saying is from the inner psychology, right? That it's not so much that they've necessarily tapped out and are just self-inserting themselves again. They feel like they're being drugged back in. Now, you'd say they're not. Okay, that's fine, but that's not quite, I think, what's going on. what I'm saying.
I mean, if you're a single guy and you're not interested in pursuing women at this point in your life, then I mean, what is there to talk about? Like, who is dragging you in? Maybe your parents would drag you in. It's like, you're 30 years old. Oh, why aren't you married yet? Like, you'll get that shit from your parents. But like, who on the internet is telling you, like, why aren't you married? Why aren't you
there's
having like putting out like
army,
6
there's a
babies?
whole army of Twitter wife bros that are just on the man up screed.
Yeah, and I think that's bullshit. Like, saying that like all the problems are basically like, oh, like if you were to fix all the issues with modern women and such, then they would all be fixed if men would just man up. Yeah, I think that's obvious bullshit. I think a lot of the issues with women in this day and age are the result of women's own choices, women's own struggling, combating many of the issues that we have in modernity, of which men have plenty of as well. You know, there's plenty of issues in modernity that men have to tackle with. But, you know, again, at the end of the day, like, you know, here's what it really comes down to, Todd. I actually have standards for men, you know, and I don't for women. You know, like it's just how it goes, right? I expect and hold men to a standard, and for women, I just hold them to the standard of whatever man is going to be in their life. You know, like I don't expect women to be deep thinkers. I don't expect them to be leaders. I don't expect them to, you know, quite frankly, like correct their behavior unless that's being enforced upon them by a man within their vicinity. Like, I'm not at all surprised that they're running around and taking advantage of like simping bros and everything like this, because I actually have standards for dudes.
Hunger.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And just going off of that point, that's why that's one of the things I really love about the Wifejack meme. It's like, I mean, first of all, she's the Wifejack is the perfect mid. I mean, the red hair, the face, the clothing, she's just like this is the perfect embodiment of the mid. And like one of the things that people didn't understand about the Wifejack, I'm specifically talking about people like AA and Mr. D. Mr. D might be a special case, but AA has no excuse not to not understand this joke. And some of the things that came out of the Wifejack meme is that like literally all women are the same. Like, if you know one woman and if you've been in a relationship with one woman, you've heard 90% of the Wifejack meme, you know, slogans throughout your life. I mean, what do you think about this, RedHawk? Because I find that extremely endearing, and that's kind of a white pill. It's like literally all women are the same. This is not a hard problem. It's not that hard of a problem to solve.
Well, it's hard until it isn't, right?
You know, and it's like that classic quote, like, you know, when you start getting bankrupt, slowly at first and then all at once, right?
It's basically how it goes with trying to figure out how women operate. It's like, yeah, it's extremely difficult to get there, but once you're there, you're like, oh, I've cracked the secret code. Like, it's really easy to deal with now. I'm not struggling as much as I used to. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like that women are basically all the same. I like that they're malleable, which is fucking thank God that they are. You know, like guys will talk about like, oh, you know, women not having like real opinions and stuff is a problem. Well, actually, that's a good thing, because that's what we call pair bonding. And it's like her basically adapting her opinions to yours is how she gets attached to you and how she sticks around for the long haul. Basically, if women were like men, God, can you imagine having to have like an intellectual conversation in a debate with a woman in your house every single fucking day to try and convince her to still like be your friend, like you have to do with like some guy friends and such? That'd be fucking infuriating. That'd be taxing.
On top of the hormones. Yeah, like that. Like that, the domestic violence would be like 10,000% increase.
Yeah, exactly. Now, like you guys, so much of this discussion comes from a rooted egalitarianism that everyone has been fed since they were little kids. You know, particularly in Western countries, that men and women are exactly the same. They respond to the same things. They communicate in the same way. They hold similar opinions on things, and you just have to throw all the stuff like out of your mind immediately. It's like this is why I love the mental framework so much. Women are the most responsible child in the house. It's one of my favorite mental models in the RP, and it's so perfect because you know you just get it into your brain. And it's like, okay, like yeah, your criticisms, your values, the things you're saying aren't really real in the sense of you haven't thought out these positions like a guy would. You know, you haven't done the research, you haven't done the reading, you haven't had deep conversations. You kind of just heard it from somebody, you trust that somebody, and then you're going to go and parrot it. It's like, okay, well, as soon as you start trusting me and get attached to me, then you're just going to mimic what I'm doing, which just saves me all the time in the world from sitting down and having an intellectual debate with you.
Well, this sort of moves to a bit of a darker turn, because I feel like that there's a certain sort of specter that's haunting this whole discussion that nobody really wants to talk about because it's not really considered appropriate for polite conversation. But there's a sense in which the wife bros and other people that haven't made it yet that want to will hold sort of like the carrot out there, and it's like given the way society's going, and especially after a certain age women can't have children anymore, there's just going to be a vast body of women that are just out, and by extension men, because they won't be able to get them. And as the population gets smaller demographically, it's true there will still be younger women, but it'll be a smaller and smaller circle to go from for the guys that are surviving on the other end. And there's just plenty of guys that are NGMI from just what life has thrown at them. So the idea is, see, part of it is people still think it's like 2000. It's like the meta, even though we all know the meta has shifted, it's almost like we can't publicly say it because it's too dark and scary. RedHawk.
Yeah. There is definitely a good point there to be made. I mean, you can look at this from a more historical perspective, and through things like gene research and other historical things that you can go ahead and research, and you'll notice that throughout the majority of history, most men did not pass on their genes, but almost all women did. And there's many factors for this. A lot of men went off to die in wars before they even had a chance to pass on their genes. There's women's hypergamy that also is a factor in this. There's harems, particularly in the ancient world. So there's many reasons for this. And also because we're living in such an affluent time, it's becoming less so right now, given all the issues we talk about today. But we don't have the same degree of like a die off of, men at the low ends of the bell curve that you would have had in previous times. So there absolutely is going to be a huge uptick in single men, for lack of a better word, for the rest of their lives. And there's a number of things that you can do about that. Some people can lash out and say this is, horrible and it's going to lead to more violence, which I think there's a decent argument to be made for that probably will be the case. I think what is probably going to end up happening is you're just going to have a lot of these guys check out due to things like sedation, things like pornography, perhaps like the new AI girlfriend revolution or something like that might occur to this. I mean, this is an unpopular opinion in our circles, but I'm very pro prostitution. And I think legalizing prostitution is a much better idea than having AI girlfriends around. I think that's a much more healthy way 100%. Of dealing with this. Yeah. So I don't know. You do bring up a good point, though, Todd, that there is going to be a faction of guys who lost out on the mating game. And we are going to have to, I don't want to say deal with these guys, but we are going to have to give these guys paths to better use their talents as opposed to, just hoping they plug themselves into the matrix.
Well, and just again, this also applies to women post-wall who didn't lock a guy down. They're out.
Yeah, it's true. The thing is that they're always just going to be treated differently than they will for men. There's always going to be some simp that'll take care of them. I think this kind of like meme that guys have in their brains, like the woman's going to suffer and get her comeuppance when she's like 40 and hits the wall. I mean, like, oh, I bought the Sex and the City lie and now I'm old and alone. I mean, yeah, there definitely will be a large faction of women that are like that, but also at the end of the day, like, you're never really going to get society or women in general or anybody else to really like do a retrospective think about, I really should have adjusted my decisions more and I would have led to a different outcome. It's just not how women think. And it's also not the way that the society is going to go. They're just going to blame men for everything. And what you could do as a guy at that point is just say, fuck you. I don't really care what you have to say. Blame me for shit. I've done my part. I've done the best that I could. I've made my own choices. And I'm not responsible for the fucking problems that are going on for this particular group of women. It's not my responsibility.
Hunger.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a bit that I think that's the thing that's a big shift in the meta. I would say, the phenomenon of the post-wall, Sex in the City, late 30s, early 40s career woman that just never got hitched, that just never, couldn't hold down a boyfriend, was too disagreeable, focused on her education and her job more than pair bonding with a man, and that's kind of like, yeah, that's a big shift. And one, that leads to like the generations are shrinking. The populations are the what's it called, TFR is
Going down.
has basically collapsed, or is on the way to collapse, and the only thing that's holding that back is immigration. But that's kind of like, yeah, that meta and operating in that environment, especially for younger dudes, that's, I don't know, the woman will be fine. They'll be taken care of. Society will not abandon the 30 to 40-year-old career woman. They're going to be fine. They have an income. They'll work, they'll have Medicare when they're retired and elderly, but like, nothing's going to change from that. It's just a shift in like the social dynamics. And
Okay.
then maybe there might be a chance that, younger women, especially like, Zoomers and younger, they might see that. And, I think that feminist concept is incredibly weak these days. And we're just not seeing that level of commitment to the career and to that Sex in the City lifestyle as we would have. I don't know if you agree with this, RedHawk or Todd.
Well, actually, I'm going to keep going down the dark road, because I think there's something even darker that nobody's talking about. And this, the demographic that I initially thought this might affect most would be post-wall women, but it could affect a lot of people as life gets worse and worse. Massive implementation of government-sponsored suicide, like made in Canada.
I mean, we already see that. That's already here.
Oh no, that would be the perfect solution. I mean, we all know the social services are broadly insolvent. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. The boomers didn't really want to shift off this mortal coil, even though they said all the problems would be for us to deal with. They're still alive to deal with them, and they're not. So I think that. See, I remember hearing one time Dave was like saying, "What are we going to do about these post-wall women?" And I'm like, "Well, I think I don't know yet, because the Democrats in America haven't really been rolling it out yet, like in Canada. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's how they deal with this problem." RedHawk.
I had a thought exercise maybe late last year, October or something about this. You guys can go back and find out on my channel, but I was bringing up a discussion about the classic courtesans and geishas discussion. And, I was having a thought exercise of perhaps, like elderly women that are past childbearing years and such might be able to have uses in that sense. And I know that sounds like a little far-fetched and radical to people in the audience right now, but I mean, this has been a staple throughout most of human history. And it's just very odd that we have this, a modern way of thinking about things where, like everyone's just expected to, every woman is expected to settle down and marry, have kids. And it certainly wasn't the social norm throughout all history, but I don't know. It's something interesting to think about. I mean, there is going to have to be some way we can appeal to these women in some manner. And I don't know. I think the other thing here is like, this goes into the broader discussion about like Islam is right about women or something, or like if we import Islam, it'll fix our feminism problems, which I think is a really subversive meme, and people shouldn't be talking about it. Like Islam is not of the West, not of our people. It's a foreign ideology. It's a foreign religion. We shouldn't be even remotely thinking about it, importing it over here. And also like from our own history in the West, women were parts of decision-making throughout a lot of our societies. Like people would, this is the point as well here. Like you don't just like take the opinion of any random woman, right? She's got to earn a say. I'll take the opinion of like my girlfriend over the opinion of some random e-thought online, right? Because she actually has an impact. She actually has a say, and I can rationally go through that decision making, think, oh, maybe she has something to say here. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's a point that she brings to the table, and maybe I'll acknowledge it. Maybe I won't. But women were always part of decision making at the higher levels of the West. Now, did men agree with them every time? Absolutely not. But they were still part of it, unlike other parts of the world.
Okay, Hunger.
Yeah, I don't have much I don't have much to add to that, but I mean that's a great segue into the Lauren Southern drama. As we saw in the cycle, we had the Alex Kashuta drama a month or two ago, and then the Wifejack explosion, and now we're on the Lauren Southern cycle, and that's a great thing to bring up if you want to bring that up, Todd.
No, I don't know what's going on with that. So you sent me a tweet, Hunger. So why don't you sort of break it down, because you've been following it and I've just heard about it today.
Yeah, so basically, to condense a lot of what has happened in the past week into a short segment, basically Lauren Southern has been attacking the red pill Andrew Tate, esque figures on the online right, and she put out this very very cringe video where it's like specifically talking about that exact issue. It's like, oh, Andrew Tate is Muslim. He's not a part of the West. He's a brownoid. 100% true. All of that is completely true. But it's like, no, because no, we in the West, we are enlightened. We are progressive. We are liberal. We give women, rights, and that's what makes us better. And that's why we should stop importing Muslims into the West. Like it's a terrible argument for many many reasons, and it doesn't take the actual criticism of the actual criticism of Islam or of mass migration that you can make into consideration. We don't do this because it's good for women. Like, you should, like, not importing 10 million migrants a year and not having mass conversions to Islam is not the way to solve feminism, and is not feminism is not the reason why the West was great. And that's kind of what she was kind of implying in that video.
Okay.
Yeah, she was implying that, like, the number one, she was talking about mass education. Like, the West was great because we educated men and women, which is totally ahistorical on the face of it. But I don't think we need to be holding Lauren Southern up as a paragon of right wing thinking.
Well, and I think another thing to be pointed out too, and this is something that Dave didn't touch on when he covered his perspective on this. A lot of these guys that are complaining about women are not only complaining about lack of romantic prospects, but the fact that, as BAP says, we live in a longhouse, and they're the hall monitors used by the state and corporation to constantly psychologically beat you over the head. And this is one of the ways that they vent. RedHawk.
Yeah, you could definitely be a part of that for sure. I mean, like, men and women will be venting their issues about the opposite sex on the internet. I mean, this goes back to what Hunger was talking about earlier. Like, a fix for this would just be have a segregated internet space where women could talk about women things and men could talk about men things. But again, not really something that's going to happen. I mean, what it really comes down to at the end of the day is, what are you going to dedicate your energy to as a guy? Are you going to dedicate your energy to women complaining online that they're being made fun of? Or are you going to dedicate something actually that's tangible, that's going to fix you in your own life? Are you going to dedicate your time to getting a good degree or getting a good job? Are you going to dedicate your time to going to the gym? Are you going to dedicate it to, I don't know, having sex with your girlfriend in real life or something? Literally anything else other than listening to people complaining and bitching, whether they're men or women. It's just, you have your duty as a guy in our species is to create things. That's basically your biological function, is to go out and create stuff. And women's biological imperative is to spend stuff. It's basically what they are, professional resource extractors. It's just how it goes, right? And it's never going to change. So what are you going to dedicate your time to? Are you going to dedicate your time to commiserating with other people, or are you going to go out and actually make your situation better? I mean, just on the start of it, you're already on the high IQ end of the spectrum. If you're listening to this right now, like, you're not some normie who's just walking around. So you have all the tools ready at your disposal. You just actually have to, I fucking hate this term because, like, we attach it to the boomers, everything. You just gotta buckle up, buckaroo, and pull your stuff up out of your bootstraps. And yeah, that's a lot of bullshit coming from boomers because they don't actually understand the current state of play. But there are plenty of guys online right now that do understand the state of play and are swapping notes on to how you might be able to navigate through the new landmines and such that you might come across in this day and age. So the tools are out there. You just got to put your nose to the grindstone, and complaining about it is never going to work as a guy. You can complain all night and day if you're a woman, because people are going to have natural sympathy for you. We call it the women are wonderful phenomena, right? But you as a guy complaining, nobody's going to take your side. And you could say that that's unfair and that's unjust. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm not here to argue, gender dynamics that have been with us since the beginning of time, right? But it's just a simple fact of the matter. So you going to complain about it, or are you going to go to work?
I mean, your life is in your hands. If you don't fix your own problems. No one's going to fix it for you. Like, daddy government is not going to fix it for you, and I don't know, mommy feminism is not going to fix it for you. If you want to get something done, you kind of have to do it yourself, and that's a Sisyphean task in some things, but it's not impossible. Like, your forefathers, your grandfathers, your great grandfathers had to struggle and had to do shit like this too. They had to find a woman. They had to get a job. They lived in absolute poverty in many cases. Like, your life, you are responsible for what you make your life into. No one else is going to no one's going to gift you a better life.
Okay, actually, this is another meta issue that I think needs to be focused on. When people say that men did this 200 years ago under conditions of poverty by the measurements of our economic standards, that's true, but that's also irrelevant. They had intact, functioning communities, as well as rooted identities in religion, ethnicity, and culture, where people were looking out for each other. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to make it. And so, one of the things that the libertarians have talked about is the end of fraternal organizations. If you were a member of some fraternal organization, you could basically, get your way basically paid from one end of the country to the other, just, being taxied by other fraternal members. And that's literally all gone once you get to this level. And furthermore, the services that you would need to get done, say like 200 years ago in a village, you didn't have to pay people for. People did it for you as a matter of ethnic or religious obligation and duty. And so, yeah, you could be butt broke, but it didn't matter. Or if you want to go further back to your favorite time period, RedHawk, the nomads of the steppe, they weren't paying each other for these services. I mean, if you were in the tribe that wasn't, attacking the other tribe, this was just what you did. And that's entirely broken down now. And so they were operating under a different social, economic, and religious arrangement such that they didn't really notice they were in poverty as much as we would now. RedHawk.
Yeah, I mean, I guess everything's all relative, right? Now, I mean, again, like we were talking about how like there's issues with more like the boomer side of things, or even more of like the TradCon sphere or such like that, or also these wife bros overlap into this as well, is that they that they have a different expectation of what the actual story is for like guys who have boots on the ground as opposed to what it was in their own time. So yeah, I mean, I guess it is all relative, but the point still remains the same. The battlefield is, well, let me say it this way: the war is the same, but the battlefield has switched. All right, so the end state goal is still the same. You're just gonna have to navigate around different ways, right? It's like you're playing a game of Civilization, right? Well, you've now progressed from the medieval era, and now you're in the Renaissance era, and there's gunpowder now, so you have to adjust your tactics accordingly.
I mean, that's true, but go ahead, Hunger.
Yeah, no, I was like, no one is saying, we're living in an incredible time. No one is saying that. We don't believe that, like, there were always there were many good things about the past, and there were many horrible things about the past, just as there are today. There are many great things about today, and there are many horrible things about today. That doesn't change the fact that you might not have the tools, your grandparents had, but there are tools that exist today that they didn't have as well. It's what you make out of it. Yeah, you're missing a lot of tools, 100%. We're not living in that environment. We're living in a very difficult environment right now, especially when it comes to the romantic scene.
Right. But the point that I'm getting at is that when we look at these older societies that we are inspired by and wish to emulate, like say, for example, if we go far enough back, I mean, everybody seems to agree that there's a lot of value in classical civilization, specifically the ancient Rome. Well, the one thing that you didn't see, I mean, I suppose in the later Republic you probably saw more of it because it was more financialized, is this idea that it's your problem, not mine, right? It's partly this is the libertarian mentality creeping in again. Because in ancient Greece and Rome, the idea was that there was the polis, the community. We'd all pitch in for each other. And on the one hand, I can see why these guys would be angry. It's like, well, look, if I'm getting it every day, day in and day out from the world, from my parents, from the boss, from the HR, from the government, the one place you don't want to be getting it is the right-wing space that was supposed to be your sanctuary. And then I think also, too, one of the things is, to the extent that the left is successful, one of the things that causes it to be successful is that, and I've said this in other videos before, is that it props up as many of its own as possible, right? It's like, oh, if you have the right ideas, they're going to make sure that this safety net, this minimum threshold, you're not going to fall below it. And so that's much more attractive to somebody who's politically naive than saying, Jordan Peterson, find the biggest boulder and carry it. It's like you're probably already carrying a pretty big boulder. RedHawk.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's an attractive, end state goal, perhaps to like throw out to guys, but again, like it's simply not here, and I don't really think that. I just don't really think it's productive for a lot of people to be thinking in this way, especially if you aren't the ones who are higher up in these communities, like in basket weaving or in the Old Glory Club or anything else like this, who are actually trying to make ways to organizing communities in such a way. I mean, again, like there has to be like a class thing involved with this as well, too. I mean, like if you, why are you dedicating so much to your time to thinking like, oh, like, well, this safety net could have been better and be more useful to me. It's like, yeah, I mean, we could have arguments back and forth about that, but again, it's just, I think it's really unhealthy for a lot of guys to be thinking in such intellectual terms as opposed to just being focused on what's real and what's right in front of them. That's just my own opinion on the matter.
And just to jump off of that, and Todd, I completely agree with you. I've lived in a more traditional community for some time, where people would literally drop everything they're doing at the drop of a hat just to, like, I don't know, help you with your roof or fix your stove or repair a car or something like that. I've seen that happen, and that's very understandable. And I don't see that in the United States and in the West these days. That's 100% true. That's a great thing about some of those traditional communities. However, this is the problem with our day and age and our society as it is right now. It's that if you want people to help you, you either, one, join a community, or if you don't have a community around you, then if you want to form your own kind of community, you have to provide other people something of value. Like, you can't expect people to give you charity on the street where they'll fix your car, where they'll fix your stove, where they'll do your roof for you. It's like you have to provide other people something of value so that you become friends with those people. Like for example, like I would do this in a heartbeat. I've paid for somebody's plane ticket to go somewhere across the country. Why did I do that? Why did they were in a struggling financial situation? Why did I buy them a plane ticket? Because they were my friend, and because we have a very friendly exchange of friendship, and they have something of value. I enjoy spending time with that person. I enjoy that person's personality. I enjoy conversating with that person. So if you want people to help you, you have to give other people something of value so they will reciprocate with you, because people are naturally reciprocative, and if you are a likable person, they will want to reciprocate with you.
Okay, this is a question that I want to ask RedHawk, because I feel like that this would help explain the juncture here. So while we all agree on broadly what a more positive end state would look like, what do you think, RedHawk, is the biggest limitation for those who have already sort of made it to build the kind of community that we're talking about? Do you think A, it's that they haven't yet created enough wealth to do it? Do you think it's B, they haven't developed enough of an ideological perspective to handle certain modern problems? Or do you think it's C, that a change of mind is required that hasn't happened yet? Which one of those three do you think is the reason why this isn't happening yet?
I would probably say C is the most likely, and it's not necessarily a change of mind. It's just a change of circumstance, and that, like we talk about how we're entering a civilizational winter in Spenglerian terms, right? Well, I don't really think that things have gotten so bad yet as to the point where people are thinking in this kind of manner of, on a mass scale, mind you, that we need to start building these kinds of communities. I don't think it's quite there yet. Obviously, that's subject to change as things continue to crash all around us and such. So perhaps that's definitely a part of it. But again, I think another huge part of this is just the hierarchical nature of men. It's just really, really difficult to get dudes in a group in that way, especially when we're not in close proximity to each other and spending a lot of time in the real with each other, it's going to be really, really hard for you to, get somebody who's like in California to go out of his way to do something for an Anon guy in Maine, right? It's just, but we have such limitations in this regard.
Okay, so that's good, because this is what I wanted to ask. That's why I continually bring this up on a theoretical level, because I think for those that have already, quote, made it, there's a lot that haven't, but for those that already have, wealth creation isn't the problem. It's for those that haven't made it yet. And I don't think it's ideological in the sense that, this movement's been around for over 10 years now. I think a lot of the perspective shifts. Well, actually, maybe there's more that need to happen, because if I get to be invited as a speaker to the OCG Club this year, I'll have some very interesting things to say on that. But I think the number one issue is the change of mind, is the idea of who am I responsible for, and who am I to care for. So, I mean, obviously, those in your immediate community, the ones that would have a higher claim, ceteris paribus, than anyone else. But if we're trying to produce this news culture, like, think of a fraternal organization, right? Let's make it totally apolitical. The entire point of joining said fraternal organization is that once you've, paid your dues, you got in, you're solid. Like, you're not, people aren't going to let you fall into the muck, right? You're in the club now. I don't see anything like that really being talked about as like a goal, an intermediate goal to get to this broader point. So, like, for example, in the early days of Christianity, when it was a persecuted religion, it survived in part because it had the strong in-group preference. It had the strong preference for other Christians and helping them out in extremely dire situations. And that's another thing, in-group preference. That was like the watchword for the DR, 8 years ago. And that seems to be on mute now because of what I would call the libertarian insurgency. And I think that's
well, I think a lot of it just goes back to what I was describing about earlier. It's just proximity and such. I mean, the OGC is trying to make strides in as it relates to fraternal organizations with our chapter initiatives and such, and it's definitely something we probably agree on. But I mean, again, it's just, I mean, I'm just sitting here and it's like, listen, like, my partners over at the OGC, like, we're really good friends at this point. We've had this company now for going on, 2.5 years at this point. Pretty soon, we meet every week. We talk all the time. We've, hung out in meet space and real life and such. We care about each other's, well-being and everything like that. We want to help each other out. But, like, yeah, extrapolate that out a little bit further, right? It's like, my immediate sphere of influence is like my immediate friends I have in my community, my family, the women in my life, and such like that. And then I have like my outer sphere of influence being my business partners and other friends I know in the online space. But to extrapolate that out even further, to say like, okay, so let's say like some guy in the chat like wants to come up and ask me for support and stuff. It's like, I only have so much bandwidth, right? I only have so much that I can give out to other people. And as you get further and further away from the nucleus and from the center, it's like, it's going to be harder and harder for me to care about your problems, right? So there's only so much room for me to care.
Okay, Hunger.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that with RedHawk. But going back to what Todd was saying before, I mean, one of the things that we had in the past was that religious and or ethnic community where it's like, if you, without even knowing this person, without even, ever meeting them or their family in real life, like, you would do acts of service for them because they were either part of your ethnic group or part of your religious community. And like, we don't have that today, at least not in America. The minorities, which I'm very familiar with, they have that, but Western Americans of European descent don't have that, and that's kind of the biggest problem. That's kind of what needs to be solved, and it's a hard problem to solve. That's why I go back to the point. It's like, if you want people to help you, you have to provide something of value. They know that's why that point is very, very important, because that's kind of the foundation where you can start building that kind of community and or friend group.
Yeah. Right. So there's two levels here, right? There is the actual realities on the ground, which are stark and difficult and hard. Yes, that's true. But I think what a lot of guys are upset at is this is something. Okay, I'll make it very concrete, very clear. So in this community, there's an expectation that it's possible for you that you get married and have a family. And of course, that's more broadly a conservative issue in the United States. But what is the case here is that there's people have an attitude that, well, Stalin said this about force when he's talking about Eastern Europe in the end of World War II. He's going to take as much as he could he's holding a broom at one end and sweeping it over the country, which represents his reach. Now that's the use of force, but that same analogy holds for consumption spending. So you can basically in America consume as much as you're allowed to, as much as you're financially allowed to by what you can make and what you can hedge against paying taxes. Right. That's often far in excess of what it actually takes to support a family. And then there are the guys that are waiting behind to catch up, and they can't even meet the bare minimums to start a family. So you're going to get kind of PO'd at guys who are like, well, I've already made it. I'm consuming well above what I need to maintain my family of 4. And I'm not going to help you. And you better double down and find the biggest load you can carry. I mean, I'm not surprised that a lot of guys are just, flipping the birdie, so to speak, at that. RedHawk.
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely is an issue with messaging to some degree of a lot of these guys, like we've been talking about, and there definitely is a tendency for you to say, "Well, fuck you, flip the bird. You don't know what it's like. You know about my issues and such." And you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe they don't know what they're talking about, and particularly. But believe me, I've got no sympathy for trads mouthing off on Twitter talking about how everything is great if you just go and marry that girl, right? Because I think what the crux of the whole issue that we're talking about here is one of the things that guys are really, really upset about is that in the past there were social conventions and other organizations that would give you a leg up and help you out with some of the more essential parts of your life, right? There would be things like the church, there would be things like the military, there would be things like your local community, your leaders, even the government to some extent. They were geared way more to the flourishing of men in society. And quite frankly, you just have none of those now. Everything has been longhoused. Everything has fallen under the gynocracy. Your church leaders aren't going to hold, women accountable in your relationships. The government certainly isn't going to do it. Most of the people in your whole life have been, subject to this gynocratic brainwashing, certainly in the schools and everything like this. So yeah, there's plenty of reasons for guys to be angry and such. My response is like, well, you can make like small little increments and try and think about, how are we going to change, the church to, make it more amenable for men to join it again. And as far as I'm concerned, like, I don't really know if these institutions could be reformed so much as being rebuilt by something else. And maybe that's where people should be focusing their energy at. And also, like, I think another thing here, Todd, is that guys really, really don't want to be the asshole, right? You don't want to be the guy that's like the subject to everybody else yelling at you and such, saying like, oh, you got to man up and do this. You got to do what I tell you. And nobody wants to be in the circumstance, in the situation when you say, no, I'm not going to listen to what you're telling me. No, I don't really care. No, I'm going to disagree with what you say. And to hell with you if you're going to try and force me to do it. It's not a position that most guys want to be in. But quite frankly, I think in this day and age, in the gynocratic world we're living in, you have to be comfortable with being a complete asshole. People are going to yell at you. They're going to hate you. They're going to say all sorts of mean things about you, like how you're not putting the interests of women first or anything like that, or not, putting the community's interest above your own and such. I mean, and kind of just have to be comfortable with being the villain, for lack of a better word. And it's not exactly easy to do either.
Hunger?
Yeah, no, I mean, I disagree with very little of what RedHawk just said. It's kind of your it's kind of your tragedy to deal with. You are Sisyphus. You got to push the rock. That's your rock. That's your boulder to bear. You just got to push the rock up the hill. And we can affect change in the only thing we can affect change in is in our own lives. Like I know that's boomer. I know we would all love to be social engineers and like play life as if it's like civilization 5. We would all love for that to be the case, but it's not. The only thing we can change is what affects us, what affects our immediate environment and the immediate relationships we have.
Well, so we can also look at this so on the one hand, again, I agree with RedHawk that the situation is just bad, and you might be, it's not strictly speaking constructive to be doing this because, opportunity cost, there's something else you could be doing. But nonetheless, though, what this is representative of is a sort of a canary in the coal mine, where it's like there's a problem. Now we can differ on what that problem is, right? But there's a problem that is going persistently unaddressed. And I think the interesting question is why. So for example, and I'll give this to you first, Hunger the Dye Merchant, because when you have the wife bros, and many, not all of them are Christian, right? But many of them would profess to be Christian. And many of them are older. I mean, they're millennials. Some of them are older millennials, but many of them are Gen X and older. And they've already made it. And they're, quote unquote, living the life, unquote, right? But then you compare that with the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, and the fact that the rich man was held accountable personally for having all of these things and then not helping out Lazarus. It's in very poor taste when Christian professing men are doing this.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. And it's not just Christian men. It's yeah. A lot of these wife bros, they're older. They're actually very late. They're very old millennials, most of the case. And millennials are just a funhouse mirror of the boomers. So it's like this. Yeah, this comes from their boomer parents, where it's like, oh, if you follow the right procedure, then your life is going to turn out great. And we're just not living in that script anymore. That's the problem. That's the problem with the wife bros. The other problem with the wife bros, going back to their internalized boomerism, is that like they lecture to younger men. They lecture to the younger generations as if, and without understanding the context and without understanding the circumstances and environment of the younger generations. So it's like, oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? That worked for me. And it's like, we don't live in that world anymore. That literally does not work. And that comes from, their internalized boomerism. What people hate most is, one, the lecturing, and two, pulling up the ladder up from under them.
Yep.
I made it. So I have a great life. I don't need to pass down my inheritance. I don't need to pass down my skills, my knowledge, my experience down to the next generation. They gotta figure it out themselves. Like that's what really pisses people off. And that's the biggest problem with the wife bros.
Well, yeah. And of course, that's not really a question for you, RedHawk, because, that's for Christian, an in-Christian thing. But so many of these wife bros do call themselves Christians. The other thing is, too, that with the just the level of disconnection between when success was possible. First of all, there's a certain meta question of expectations of success, right? So when these guys talk about success, it's still the post 1945 white picket fence American dream. Now, if and I think there's a handful of people in this movement that still believe that we're right around the corner from cold fusion and some high tech future, but I think a lot of us are black pill, or well, maybe not black pill, but red pilled on the Kali Yuga. They're just going to keep going down. And what an important shift that has to happen that hasn't happened yet is, if we are going into this collapsed state, we need to really radically rethink what family is, specifically with regards to economics, because all of these not only assumptions but actual economic structures will not exist. And I wouldn't expect the incels to be able to have that answer. There's too much on their plate to worry about. And the people that have the time to think about it aren't. And I think that's the crucial crisis question. I think last year there was some like pro-natalist conference in Texas that Charles Haywood referenced. The thing is, once all this financialized society goes up in smoke, okay, well, you're going to have to radically rethink how you do this, because even what they're doing will be impossible for them. And that's an extremely meta question, but that's where I'd like to shift this conversation, RedHawk.
Before you answer that, I do have to get going, guys. I do have a family obligation to attend to. So, but it's been great. It's been great chatting with you guys, and I'll definitely talk to you guys in DMs and in private for sure.
All right, see you, Hunger. Glad to have you.
Yeah, see you,
And
Hunger.
take it.
Always a pleasure.
It's been a great talk, guys. Have a great night.
You too.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, and then there were two. Well, we're gonna
there were two. Well,
Yeah.
what is still present in spirit?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Could you repeat the last question there, Todd, please?
Yeah, so it's a meta question. All of the assumptions that go into success in this particular context are the white picket fence, 1950s America, family of four. That's what all of these people are thinking of. Because here's what's the case, right? Having a family and reproducing throughout history has not at all looked like that model. And as that model becomes practically impossible due to economic realities, if we're gonna have to re-envision by going to earlier models to see what that would look like, and we're not even close to that at the moment. And that's where I'd like to shift the meta.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do agree that the expectations like this, like the Norman Rockwell, like 1950s, right, of like the white picket fence, everything was just such a unique blip in history, and quite frankly, I think is next to useless if you want to actually apply that to 2024 and beyond. But also, I have some issues with the concept of pulling everything from the past as well, because we're simply in a completely different age as well. Like the only way out is through, right? I mean, we could definitely look for some inspirations from the past, but also in the past, they didn't have things like the Industrial Revolution to tackle with. They didn't have things like birth control. They didn't have things like social media. They didn't have things like feminism to the degree it is today. They also didn't have things like, lower testosterone rates and a relative lack of, wars and such like that, where you had a huge, like a die off of men as such. So there are a lot of issues that we have to tackle in our own time that are unique to us. And I really am, I do despise this. I will throw a bone here, and I will absolutely agree with you on one thing here, Todd. I do hate this expectation that everybody has to have a successful relationship the XYZ way that is like laid out before you by some arbitrary, metric of success done by trads who want to bring everything back to the 1950s. Like, yeah, I think that's really stupid, and I think it doesn't really make much sense. I think there are plenty of ways for you to be successful in your own right. However it is that you want to navigate through this age that we're currently in right now. And if you want to get the 1950s style thing, okay, you can go and try for it. I have some disagreements with it, particularly of how viable it is in this day and age and the risks it opens you up to as a guy. But fair enough. If that's what you want to do. It's not my business to, interfere with how you're going to go about courting people and such. But I will say, like, be like me, it worked for me, is really stupid advice, and I don't like it at all.
Yeah, no, I don't either. But yeah, I think we covered the topic, and I know Michael Pohl wasn't able to make it, but you're here in spirit, brother, and Hunger the Dimorphian stuck it out for the entire time. So what do you want to leave us with, RedHawk?
I'll just simply leave it with that, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. You have to be comfortable with being the asshole in this day and age as a guy. The male experience is that everybody wants something from you, and particularly everybody wants something for you for free. Is just like the male experience and everything. And you just have to be very cautious about what you're going to put your energy towards on certain things. There's going to be like groups of, men that want to commiserate and say like, oh, we need to start putting our effort into making sure that I'm going to be successful in certain things. And I don't know, if you want to put your effort into that, go ahead, go about doing it, but don't try and convince me that it's the only way to go about doing things as well. But at the end of the day as well, there are definitely a lot of issues facing guys in this day and age, issues that no other men in all of history have had to tackle before. But there also are some benefits in this day and age that you can use to your advantage as well.
never before have we had access to the internet where everybody can learn how to, properly lift weights and such, or, do cold approaches or get fashion treatments or whatever it is. The resources are available to you. And, it's not my position to go about lecturing you as to how you want to go about solving your reproductive problem. I mean, if it works for you, great. And I'm not really one for judging other guys about how they want to have relationships with women. The how you get into my inner circle is attached to things that are much more important to me. Like, are you a friend? Can I trust you? Do you work hard? Do you have my back when, shit hits the fan, so to speak? I don't really care, what your relationships with women are like until it starts actually interfering with me and what we're trying to work on.
All right. Thank you, RedHawk. And again, thank you, Hunger the Dye Merchant, though you just had to leave. This is Todd Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast, signing off.